Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how you can torque your steering nut, which is another one of those things that is regular scheduled maintenance on a bike. Doesn't matter what kind of bike you have, this is one of the normal things you have to do that you may not know if you're a new bike owner or someone that's used to working on cars, because there are a lot of things on bikes that just don't apply to cars. Cars, you pretty much change the oil, put some windshield washer fluid in them, and they're pretty much good to go. Bikes have a lot more things, like your throttle body sync, lubing your chain, cleaning other parts. Well, this is just another one of those things. Now, this does require some specialty tools that not everybody may have, but you know what? None of them are that expensive. The first thing, and this goes for a lot of work you're going to be doing on a bike if you do it yourself, is a quality torque wrench. That's just basic equipment that everybody that does pretty much anything should have. It's a one-time investment, and we are working with some very specific torque values here. So this is a case where German torque specs, good and tight, those don't apply. We're going to very specific numbers for different steps for this procedure. Now, as far as how often you need to do this, consult your individual service manuals. For FJRs, the interval isn't that bad. It's I want to say it's right after the break-in, and then something like 12,000 miles, 16,000 miles, something like that. So it's not too frequent, but other bikes vary. The point of this is to make sure that your steering bearings are staying seated and that everything is compressed to the correct amounts. If you let it go, if things get loose, your steering can get loose, you can get a little bit of a wobble, but more importantly, your bearings will wear out a lot faster. And that's obviously a little more involved to fix, more expensive, and completely avoidable as long as you maintain the torque on this assembly, keeping them squished together. And that's what we're doing, is torquing the steering nut assembly, which is right on top of your main steering bearing set, and it just makes sure it's in kosher specs. Not too tight, not too loose, swivels nicely, good to go. This is really easy to do, but like I said, it does require a couple special things. Now, most bikes are going to have a specific tool for doing this kind of work, because parts that we're going to be getting to, you can't just put a socket on or an Allen wrench. It's kind of a funky little setup. So in the case of most Yamahas, they have this tool here. A little expensive from the dealer, but here's a tip: don't get the dealer tool. Yamaha doesn't manufacture these, they just have them made. They're just stamped metal and they put a part number on them and they triple the price. I got this off of eBay, 32 bucks shipped. All right. The only important thing is that you get one that's reputable, because the dimensions of this are absolutely critical. It's not a problem. Check online for whatever forums are popular with your bike. You can obtain a source for it very easily. These are all over eBay for every manufacturer out there. Steering nut tool, just Google it. Basically, this is going to allow us to get around a very oddly shaped nut and put our torque wrench on it. But it's critical that it's the exact correct dimensions, because we're using the torque wrench on it. It's changing the fulcrum point for us, and the torque values in your service manual that we use this with depend on this being a very specific size. If this was longer or shorter, those torque values would be altered. So it does have to be an accurate tool. It doesn't have to say Yamaha on it. It's just a hunk of steel. The other thing is a rather large socket. This isn't something that comes in any of the kits that you're going to have. You will have to purchase this by itself, whether it's at an auto store or Sears. I actually lucked out. Now, I typically avoid Sears like the plague when it comes to buying these specialty tools, because usually they're priced out of this world. The last one I had to buy, I think it was a big 29 millimeter, and I needed it for our last Mini Cooper's oil filter. And they charged me something like $27 for it. It was just ridiculous. Now, that was a number of years ago. Obviously, Sears is kind of in trouble these days. But I went to my auto store first. Luckily, they were out of stock. They wanted 20 bucks for it, which I'm thinking was still a good deal. So I'm like, crap, gotta go to Sears. Trekked over to Sears, $8.95. Deal. Craftsman. Take it. Anyway, the Yamaha FJR 1300s take a 36 millimeter. This is going to take off that big old honking nut right in the middle of our steering column, and that will release everything as one assembly so we can get to the parts that we're actually going to be torquing down. And again, this goes on with a very high and very specific torque number also. So that's why you absolutely need a torque wrench for all of these steps. The only other thing you're going to need is a way of jacking the bike up. This completely depends on what bike you have, how you're going to do it. But the front end, the forks and the wheel need to be off the ground for this to work. Not only to check our existing parts, make sure there's no looseness. That's how we're going to be checking the bearings. But also to get accurate torque values. You can't have any compression or weight on the front end while we're doing this. In the case of the Yamaha FJR, it is very safe doing this to put something underneath the headers. I'm going to use my handy dandy textbook here. You can use a 2x4, whatever is going to evenly spread the load. There isn't a whole lot of weight. We're on the center stand. All we're doing is just tipping it up a little bit, just enough to get the front wheel off the ground. I lifted the front up to see how much weight it was. I don't know, I would estimate maybe 40 pounds. That weight is being distributed over the 4 headers, each of which is held on by 2 bolts. So that 40 pounds is being distributed by 8 header bolts. I think that's perfectly safe. There are other methods you can do. I've seen homemade steel pipe stands that go over the bike, and then straps will support it by the tank or under the frame here and kind of hold it up like that. That's perfectly cool to do too. I've also seen people do custom little 2x4 stands with little extensions, because there are a couple little aluminum offshoots. One's right next to the oil drain bolt and another on the opposite side. I'm really hesitant to do that. I would put more faith in the header bolts than those little tiny flanges of aluminum, because I know for a fact that those can crack really easily. They're not that strong. So I'm tending to stay away from that method. I'm just going to use a textbook, nice and soft. It's not going to damage any metal. And we're just going to jack the bike up a little bit off the ground. That's our first step. And there we go. Got about a 1/2 inch clearance underneath the tire. Nice and safe. Now I do greatly suggest that you cover your tank, because what we're going to be doing is taking off this entire triple tree assembly. It's going to come off as one assembly. This isn't like the one where we did the removal of the handlebars here. Nothing is going to be disassembled on the top. This is all going to pop off intact. So this will protect our paint. First thing I want to do is make sure that this nut was torqued correctly by the dealer who assembled the bike. So this is to be torqued at 85 foot-pounds. I've gone ahead and put my torque wrench to 85. And we shouldn't get any movement. We should just get an immediate click. And I did get a little bit of movement. I'd say that was a good 10 pounds off. So that's not too good. Anyway, the first thing we need to do here is remove our nut. I'm actually going to go get my old torque wrench, which I use for a breaker bar, to take that off with. You never want to use your torque wrench to remove things with. You could also use just a regular socket. Maybe put a little pipe on it, or a wrench for an extension. You know what? I'll go ahead and show you that, since that's going to be what most people have. So here I've just got a regular old socket, or ratchet, I mean. Slip that on carefully. I'm going to move the handle. I'm going to go over to the other side here. It's easier for leverage. Turn the handlebars this way, and you can see there's no tension on the handlebars. This is a good way to check your bearings also. Typically what you'll find when they start to wear is a detent in the center position, because they're actually wearing into the races, going in a straight line, or if you do a lot of off-road riding or wheelies, anything that's going to put a lot of hard pressure on those bearings. And when you swing through the center position, it'll tend to kind of settle there if they're starting to go. But this is completely free. The only thing it's binding on are all the cables, but it's completely smooth. Bearings are in perfect shape. So let's remove this nut now. You can just carefully use a socket. I mean, I keep saying socket. Wrench. Hey, a wrench. Slip it over the end here. Carefully loosen it. Go real slow. As soon as it starts to loosen, you don't need this wrench anymore. And then you can take it right off by hand. It's just that last quarter turn that is on with any force whatsoever. So this is going to expose our center column. Now what we have to do is take off 2 pinch bolts on the side. There's a washer underneath it here. Remove that. Set these 2 aside. Now we have 2 pinch bolts, one on each side right in here. These are removed with a 6mm Allen wrench. These shouldn't be in there that tight. You just want to loosen these enough so that we can slide everything up and off the forks. Just give them a few turns and that'll be good enough. Now with those pinch bolts loosened, we can go ahead and wiggle this whole assembly up and off the forks. Just carefully pull it straight up. Now on this ES, we have the electronic cables going to each top of the fork. On the non-ES, these are just going to be your click adjusters. This actually has more interference than the A model. So what I'm going to do here is put another cloth in front, because what we're going to do is tip this forward a bit, and it's just going to rest a little bit on the gauges here. You just want to get it just over the top of these adjustment stacks. Be sure you're not putting a lot of pressure on them here to pinch them. This is just going to rest here, alright? Here's the entire assembly that we're after. First, we're going to pull off what's called the lock nut, and it's just a piece with legs that's just locking 2 nuts together. These nuts here, they both look the same. There's one on top of each other. They have these slots, and that's what the legs are for. They go in the slots, and that way the nuts can't turn if this is in place. So just lift the lock nut off. And here's where our special tool comes into play. Now the top nut is finger tight. There's no torque on it, it's just sitting there. When you put 2 nuts together on the same bolt, when you put them next to each other, they can't go anywhere. That's how they're locking together. So this bottom one can't back out. That's the entire reason this is here, and the lock nut. So just pop this off. And there's a rubber washer in between. It should stick on here. Just make sure it did. If not, pull it off also. Now that we have access to the lower nut, this is the important part. This is where our special tool comes into place. Now the torque specs for this are, like I said, designed for use with the tool. So if you were to put a big socket on here, these are not the torque specs that you would go by. In fact, they don't even give you those torque specs. They want you to use this special tool. Works kind of like a can opener. You just put this little notch in one of the slots, and then you can just lever it. Now we do need to use it in a specific way. You need a normal extension cannot be a wobble extension. And you put your torque wrench at a 90-degree angle. Okay, so we've got our wrench. Let's do it like this so you can see it. Our wrench facing up this way. You want your torque wrench at a 90-degree angle to it. That's how the torque is applied. Now it's a 2-stage torque spec for this. And contrary to most kind of fasteners, we're going to a larger figure and then back to a smaller one. The first one is just to run the bearings in and make sure they're seated to the correct level. Then we're going to fully loosen it and then run it back down to its normal torque setting where it's going to stay. So the first torque setting is 37 foot-pounds. I'm going to adjust my torque wrench here to 37. Let's see, there's 30, 5, 6, 7. All right. So we'll put our tool in here. Put our torque wrench in at 90 degrees. And torque it down until we hear the click. There we go. So there's 37 foot-pounds. Now we need to back it off. We need to back it off probably a good half rotation so that there's no torque on there, or at least it's below 13 foot-pounds, which is what we're going to go back to. Whenever you torque a bolt, you have to come underneath it and drive up to it. You can't go from 37 to 13. You need to go from 0 to 13. You understand which way I'm saying? So now we're going to break out our ratchet. So we can just quickly undo this guy. Flip the wrench around so it's facing the other way. Now it doesn't really matter about your orientation when you're undoing this. You just don't want it to slip, so just be careful. It's a little easier as you get closer to 90, but if you need a little bit of room, that's okay. You know what, I'm going to flip these bars around so I can get a little bit better leverage to undo it. It's kind of annoying to have to reposition these, but you got to do what you got to do. On goes the tool, in goes the ratchet, and we're going to loosen this guy carefully. Just enough so you've taken all the torque off of it. It'll never free spin, so don't think it'll feel like the top one. But if you have a good feel for torque, you'll know when it's below 10 or so very easily. Right there. So now it's turning with very little effort. Okay, flip the bars back around again. What I'm basically doing is when they're turned to the left, I've got the bars kind of cocked to the right, so the bars are a little straighter than the forks, so I can fit them up ahead. So I've got this one kind of to the rear of this adjuster and this one kind of over top of it to the front of it. Just like that. Okay, so now we're going to do the final torquing of this, so we're retightening it again, but we're only going to 13 foot-pounds. So this is going to be its final spot. Let's readjust the torque wrench again. Come down from 37 all the way down to 13. And let's see. Here's 10, 11, 12, 13. So not much at all. Get my extension back. 90-degree angle, remember? And just go till it clicks. It's not going to take that much. Probably just a couple turns here. go. Now you know for sure your steering bearings are seated correctly and your nuts are torqued correctly. Now this guy just goes, remember, don't forget the rubber washer. If it came apart or if it's stuck here, it should be. It goes in between the nuts. Run this down till it's hand snug against the other one. And we're going to align the nearest holes. Just like that. Drop on the lock washer. It goes anywhere. You just want it to sit down all the way. And it needs to lock into both nuts. So they do need to be perfectly aligned. Bada bing, bada boom. Now we can put our handlebars back on carefully. Just be careful not to pinch anything. Wiggle them all the way down until it seats. Okay. Now we can tighten back up our pinch bolts. These go to very tight. Good and snug. Alright, now we put our center cap back on, and that gets torqued to a whopping 85 foot-pounds. So again, adjust your torque wrench appropriately. And there's 85 foot-pounds. Put your washer on, hand thread your cap on. Then we torque it down to 85 foot-pounds. There we go. So I hope this helps somebody. Normal, easy maintenance. You just saved yourself $150, $200 rather than taking it to the dealer. Even if you had to buy every one of these tools alone, you just saved yourself $75 or $100. And like I said, the torque wrench you are going to use over and over and over and over. Granted, the 36 mil socket you're only going to use on this, but it's only $9. Who cares? The special tool, again, you're only going to use it on this. $33 on eBay. Not a huge deal. Considering the savings and how easy it is to do this, that's kind of a no-brainer in my book. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. Visit TwoWheelObsession.com. I got lots more stuff on there than just these how-to videos. We'll see you next time.